mengenai observability and Devops Automation. Sorry, dah tersasul sikit cakap. Baik, sedikit latar belakang beliau. Beliau merupakan graduan universiti tempatan kita, telah mengeluarkan produk sendiri yang akan beliau kongsikan kelak, dan mempunyai satu pasukan yang dinamik. Saya boleh kata purata usia pasukan beliau adalah di bawah 30 tahun. Macam juga ABC, macam juga di bawah purata umur pekerja mereka adalah di bawah 30 tahun. Pasukan yang itulah dah cakap lagi tadi, pasukan yang dinamik, dan saya ingat tanpa berlengah masa, saya silakan Cik Ko dengan persembahan beliau. Silakan.
Terima kasih Puan Wan. Salam sejahtera tuan-tuan puan-puan. Sekarang saya nak share tentang observability and Devops Automation. Okay, so treat this more like a tech update session. So kita cuma nak berkongsi sikit ilmu. Okay, so I think most of you have heard observability. So this is like the new buzzword untuk monitoring. Okay, and if we look at what is the difference between monitoring and observability? Okay, so I think the first question is that what's the difference? Kalau you nak tengok dari segi, when we do the monitoring for so many years, why suddenly comes observability? Okay, so I believe most of you will have the dashboard like you shown on the top left. Okay, so monitoring there, you will be monitoring your web servers, your websites, or your application. And you will have all the traffic light colors telling you whether it's healthy or whether it's experiencing some slowness. Okay, now, if based on your monitoring, you should be at the very least be able to tell system is accessible or available right now. Okay, that is bare minimum. The second thing you probably can tell if you monitor the servers will be your CPU is high or low, or any of your memory usage, DB, things like that. Right, so that is what we categorize as monitoring. And of course, you will be asking, so how do I know do I have observability? So I would say that answer this question. First question is that do you know your user behavior? Okay, if let's say today, are you still based on the user complaint? Kalau you still terima user aduan user, that means that you are still pretty much on the monitoring. Okay, and are you able to identify the root cause when incident happens? Okay, so that's another crucial area. If your monitoring today is unable to answer these two questions, then you are on the monitoring side. So what is observability? So observability looks into the additional metrics. Okay, so metrics such as like your response time, your server processing time, network time, those will be considered as metrics. Okay, how's your container, how many instances being spawned, how's each of the resource being used by the containers, those will be under observability as well. Okay, logs is things like you already have the log files and everything, but it's just how you digest it as events. Okay, so that will be on the log side. Traces is on the application level. Okay, so application level, that means we are referring to the code level, the method calls, the DB queries. How can we extend our monitoring to those areas? Okay, so those will be traces. So some people will do their own time stamping capturing, some do their own instrumentation. Some people will use open tools, open source tool like Prometheus or Open Telemetry. Okay, so that will be categorized all under as observability. So what observability provides you is the contextual information. Okay, so macam yang tadi kita tengok, if you look at the monitoring, it tells you the system up or down. It tells you the CPU is high or low. Okay, but it doesn't tell you which process. It doesn't tell you, why the CPU spike up and due to Apache, and why Apache process spike up during that time. Okay, so those kind of things in the traditional monitoring, you won't see this. Okay, so under observability, you'll be able to provide more contextual information. And of course, observability is to help you to answer the why. Okay, so basically, when you talk about observability, it gives you the different perspectives of the monitoring. that helps you to derive the answer for why. Okay, so when something happens to your application, whether the slowness or anything, you'll be able to tell the reason why. Okay, so why suddenly observability becomes so popular? Okay, one of the things is that, you know, the transformation of the technology. So most of the CIOs will say that, you know, they already embarked into the digital transformation. And what the Prime Minister has announced in February, government is also moving towards clouds and targeting 80% of the new infrastructure will be on the cloud. Okay, so you can see that the technology has changed. So it will be more dynamic and much faster now. And of course, it will not just involve in one cloud. Even when governments announce that there will be cloud technology involved, there will be 4 clouds involved. Okay, Google, AWS, Azure, and also TM. Okay, so the world's changing. So the way we want to monitor will change as well. So if we say that last time, yeah, just monitoring the website is up or down, whether, you know, we want to monitor only the server resource, is no longer sufficient. So we need to provide a different perspective for the monitoring. So the complexity is already getting more and more difficult to trace, right? If you look at all the new technology, like microservices, things like that, it's no longer you're monitoring just one particular applications. Most of the time at the back is like spaghetti. Okay, memang banyak benda akan correlate or integrate together. So that's why the complexity is getting more and more. Nobody will do the back-end changes, but most of the people will try to do front-end changes, right? They will add new interface, new channels, but the back-end usually remain the same. So how can we ensure that, you know, we monitor those things as well? Okay, and of course the scale is massive. We are no longer just look at, you know, one web server, 2 web servers, but we're looking at, you know, multi-web servers where, you know, containers and the cloud technology support. Okay, so we go small, but we go multiple, right? We go multiple instances, and of course change is accelerating as well. So it's no longer that we talk about the entire deployment or the software delivery project will be last for 1 year or 2 years. Nowadays, people will be expecting, you know, certain modules to roll out within the next few months. Okay, so the change is definitely accelerating. Stakes are high, so any problems happen to the website, immediately it will be in the social media, okay, or in the newspaper the next day. So definitely, as public sectors or government, we don't want to have that kind of reputation ties to us, right? And of course, no longer you have that many resources to deliver one project. Okay, people are expecting and less. Right. So those are the things that, you know, you got to consider whether you're already in, you know, which part of the transformation. Are you already kickstart the project, or you still, you know, lagging behind? Okay. And of course, the future plan is that what are you going to do with it? Are you going to still rely on, you know, a lot of manual labors, or are you going to automate your operations? Okay. So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself.
Can you show again your slides?
Hang on, let me share one more time. Yep. Yeah, are you able to see this?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So back to, you know, where we talk about the journey. So basically, do you have any future plans, right, to actually automate your operations as well? Okay. So we're no longer talking about the, you know, the people doing a manual deployments or testing, right? We are talking about how to automate these kind of processes where it's tedious, right? And of course, it's prolong the deployment timeline. Okay, so observability is much more than just a typical monitoring. We are also looking at into the the traces, metrics, logs. We are also looking into the behavior, metadata, those kind of matrices, and how actually it correlates back to things like open source like API, open telemetry, right? So those are the things that we want to look at. Okay, and of course the user experience side. So no longer we talk about the monitoring like when we talk about SLA, we're not just talking about how's the the CPU must be less than 80%, or the service the SLA for the application system must be 99%. Those kind of things are kind of the old days that we do this kind of monitoring. Nowadays, IT is being measured, right, by how much time is being saved. Okay, how many support tickets has been reduced, and then how fast can you resolve a problem. Those are the new SLA, okay, or we also call it as a service level objectives, right? So the measurable on productivity wise. So over here, I would like to share a screen, right, how the user analytics actually looks like nowadays. Okay, so the key thing is that apart from knowing your server performance, right, and knowing your system is up or down, it's also critical to know how your user actually utilizing your application, right? So understanding your user. So on the top left there, you can see that we are monitoring all the digital front ends that's coming in, okay, and we can tell that how much response time is being consumed, okay, for each of these. And of course, we also want to know the user behavior when they are utilizing these digital channels, right? When is the peak period, when's the off peak period, when the user experience the most slowness, things like that. Okay, and of course, we're also looking into bounce rate. So that means that if let's say I'm running a campaign today, right, how successful is my campaign, right? How many actually converted to be a sign up user? Okay, so maybe today, you are running one campaign and says that, hey, I want to, get a lot of people signing up for the credit card. So how successful is your digital campaign? You can actually using, the user analytics to analyze that and know that how many actually converted to be a sign up user. Okay. And of course, another thing I want to know is that what kind of devices that the user are accessing. So it helps to make the decision whether should I go for a mobile app or should I continue to maintain as a desktop application, right? So web browser. So in this case, if I know that, only 36% of the users are coming from PC, so the rest will go to the mobile or tablet, then in that case, I should make the decision to move to the mobile app as soon as possible. Okay, so from this kind of data, you can make the business decision whether should I move to a new platform or should I not. Okay, so it's critical to have this kind of visibility. And of course, you also want to know where the users are coming from. So for example, like today, you are assessing for information for COVID, and you want to know most of the people, are keen, which side of the region is keen on this information. So you can actually get these kind of details through the user analytics. Okay, or maybe if let's say today there are something happen to your system, okay, and which particular region is actually impacted, you can tell from here. Okay, so at least we know where the user are coming from. So the other part that I want to talk about, right, is on the Devops automation. Okay, so when we talk about observability, it's mostly what happens during the production and what kind of data that we can get to actually help to make a decision, to reduce the main time, to understand the users, to make the future plan. Devops automation is more towards of your existing development and operations. Okay, so how can we actually automate this kind of a pipeline? Okay, so when we talk about DevOps, okay, so we are actually looking at 8 phases of it. So 4 phases will be on the development, 4 phases will be on the operations. Basically, the objective is that we want to enable the collaboration between the development and operations team, right? So hence the name DevOps. So most of the time when we talk about to the different organization, development is a separate team, operation is a separate team. So when these things happen, the challenge is that development team will be very, very focused on project timeline. As long as the things roll out to the production, I'm free. Okay, my KPI is no longer being penalized. Whereas operation team got to inherit, like it or not, whether the system has been fully tested or it's a sick system, you will still need to handle it, right? You still need to take care of it. So operations team usually will be the one that's having a lot of challenges on those. So by practicing DevOps, we basically helping both teams talk to each other and ensure that the entire pipeline is solid. Okay, so that's the second point where it comes in that we want to ensure there's a faster application rollout, but at the same time we want to make sure that the software quality is there. Okay, so we don't want to compromise on the software quality just because we want to chase after the project timeline. And of course, when it comes to the production system, right? So something unexpected happens. So how fast can we actually, recover from that incident? So that is also related back to DevOps objective. So let me just give you a case breakdown, right? So we've been giving consultation to a lot of agencies, public, the private sectors, a lot of different companies, and in the end of the day, we came out with these statistics. Okay, so most of the time when we look at analyze the problem, assess certain applications when we will call in because the application is having problem, right? So most of the time we can see that 46% of the time we can do configuration fine tuning and it actually fix the problem. Okay, so configuration fine tuning, something like application configuration, DB configuration, web server configuration, those are the things that we are looking at. Okay, so by just doing configuration changes without adding any additional hardware or code optimization, it fixes the problem. The second factor that actually helps is actually code optimization, right? So sometimes when you look into the codes that they're being developed by the vendor or the in-house, sometimes they use poor practices, okay, or maybe sometimes they are not aware that they need to do DB indexing. So those are the things that actually cause a lot of slowness, right? So by doing the proper practice, by identifying which are the query or the methods that need to be optimized, only 36% of the time you can fix most of the issues. Okay, and most of the time people would like to go for hardware scaling or re-architect. Okay, so these are the favorite choices, but you can see that actually these two are the least contribute to the resolution. Okay. Most people will say that, yeah, I just put in more CPU, more memory, that will solve my problem. So that one is not necessary because from what our experience is, hardware scaling only contribute to 9% in resolving the problem. Okay, re-architect something like, for example, you have web app and DB, web app sitting in the same server and DB on a different server, right? So it actually gives an additional overhead to the web app, the front end. So in that case, you maybe want to spin it off to two different tiers. Okay, so that is where the re-architect comes in. Sometimes you can see that all the components are sitting in one server. Okay, so that's when the re-architect will help. Okay, and of course, when we talk about the resolution and faster rollout, things like that, ultimately it all comes to agile development. So a lot of people talking about agile development, right? So since last few years, people talking about agile development. And the success rate of agile development is very low in most of the organization that I work with in Malaysia. One of the reasons why is that they adopt the agile in terms of the project timeline, but the practices are not there. Okay, so if you look at how the agile development is being done, okay, so it's actually you encompass of many small modules, all right, and after that each modules will require you to do testings as well. Okay, so most of the time people will skip the testing straight to the production. So that's why they keep on having the same problem. And of course, after they tested the first module, and when it goes to the second phase, they thought that, we no need to test the first module, we can proceed with the second module. So that is when the things start to break, right? Because most of the time, your first module or the second module will actually integrate to each other. So there will be a dependency. So when you have this kind of dependency, you can't say that you skip the test. You still need to do the retesting, okay, to the regression testing to make sure that the functionality or the performance are intact. Okay, so same goes to the subsequent cycles. So when we talk about the test automation, so why we want to emphasize on test automation? Okay, so one of the reasons why is that, based on what you see earlier on, the agile development, there will be a lot of testing involved, whether you're talking about the unit testing, integration testing, or, the functional performance testing, you still need to do a lot of testing. And there will be not, many people to have a test team in-house to do that kind of testing for them, right? So every time when you have a new modules done, you probably just roll out to production and see what's the reaction. Okay, I think that's most of the people has done from what we can experience. Okay, so the key thing is that, to automate this process instead of relying on the person to run the test. Okay, so that's the key, automation. So if you look at the screen right now, you'll be able to see that what the developers need to do is just to check in the code. Okay, on the left side, you can see the big bucket. That is to check in the code, something like a software repository. So you can also use GitHub or Git. Okay, and then from there, the Jenkins will actually pull the build information and it actually kickstart the process to do the backup, deployment, and run the performance test. Right. So you can also incorporate the functional test. Okay, and it will do the automation testing. So once the test is done, you actually evaluate based on the quality gates. Okay, so for example, whether the response time is still below 2 seconds. Okay, whether the functions are able to come back with the right results. Okay, so those are the things that you want to set as the quality gates. And then once, if let's say it's the quality gates say that it's passed, then you will notify the Jira and then says that this build is ready to go. So you can proceed with the next step, which is the deployment. Okay. Otherwise, you can actually do a rollback and notify the team that this build is not good to go. So you need to fix the problem. You to do multiple testing. So the team doesn't need to bother about I need to run the test. Once you check in the code, automatically these things will be tested. Okay, so that's the key to the test automation. So it's to ensure that the right version is being deployed instead of the wrong version. So sometimes human errors happen. Also to automate the whole testing process, and of course to set the right quality gates and also to reduce the overall deployment time. So most of the time, when we talk,
sorry, the slide again. I think some glitch. Can you slideshow again the presentation?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, hang on. I think there's a problem with presenting. Okay. Yep. Can you all see?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So ultimately, is to reduce the overall deployment timeline. So we have benchmarked with some organizations that already embarked with the automation. So if let's say we talk about the testing everything, sometimes it may take them a few days, but with the test automation, it can actually reduce to a few hours. Okay. So those are the speed that we are looking at. And of course, when we talk about the test, we also talk about the deployment automation. So deployment means that, we want to roll out to the production environment. And then, of course, at the same time, a lot of people will be talking about self-healing or self-remediation. So how can we do that? So same thing, once the developers has already, upload the versions to Bitbucket and Jenkins do all the testing, everything, it will actually pass it back to the Jira. So Jira then will kickstart again and tells the Jenkins, say that, I want to do this deployment. So Jenkins will actually kickstart the deployment process. Okay, it will do the backup, deploy. It will also monitor the performance. Okay, so once the user actually come in and access, it will start to benchmark the baseline the performance. If the performance is worse than the before, then automatically it will notify the Jira. Then you can or notify Jenkins, and you can actually tell that I need to do a rollback because this is causing a production issue. So that is how you can actually do a self-remediation. Okay. If there's if let's say you don't have, you are in the cloud or your container basis and you want to spawn additional containers, you can also do so. Okay. So that will be on the, how to automate the whole entire deployment. Okay. So that's crucial because, same thing, is ultimately to automate the whole application deployment, reduce the deployment time. So, for the deployment process, some people may take up to like hours to do deployment. So, for example, the recent customer that we have, it takes about 6 hours to do a full application deployment involving total 8 servers. Okay, so by having automation, you can do parallel tasks and reducing the human errors involved. Okay, so you no need to worry about the human doing the wrong copy of the files or getting the wrong versions, things like that. And of course, you can also automate the self-remediation. So such as whether when you receive this kind of alerts, you want to do a service restart, or maybe you want to do a rollback. Okay, so those are the options that you can do. Okay, and of course, ultimately is to reduce the overall downtime. Instead of waiting for the user to complain, maybe 1 or 2 hours later, so you can actually do the checking immediate, and then after that immediately do a rollback, right? Or maybe do a service restart to reduce the overall downtime. And auto create the incident tickets instead of relying to the service desk to actually file the complaint, right? So ultimately, what we want to say is that proactively look into the problem instead of waiting for user complaint or post to the social media. Okay, and of course, lastly, I think we talk about reducing the human errors. Okay, so this one I think is quite common. We almost every organization we went to, they also have some sort of this kind of human errors once a year. Okay, so that is the things that we want to prevent, because if let's say you are running a major or mission critical applications, it is crucial that we want to make sure that the code is uploaded properly. Okay, so through our practice with our customers, okay, so they get to know that how the users are actually behaving, or how they utilize the application and what's the performance impact. Okay, and of course we also help to save millions of ringgits from the unnecessary hardware upgrade. So like I mentioned, if you remember the case study that I shared earlier on, 46% of them is actually just doing configuration fine-tuning. Okay, so we have customers that they have the problems like for 2 years, and they actually just by doing some fine-tuning on the configuration is resolve the problem instead of going for additional hardware. And of course, to reduce the overall test and deployment timeline to automation. So this is what we've been helping the customers to build, right, the recent years. So the DevOps pipeline, especially on the tests and the deployments, are the one that's time consuming. So by doing automation, you can actually reduce the amount of time taken by the team and the efforts required. Okay, so the automation will help a lot to the application team or to the operations team. Okay, and of course, ultimately, if you look at all the issues that happens most of the time with a proper performance testing, you can actually resolve those performance issues. Okay, so you can actually ensure a smooth rollout. So most of the time, I saw people have a performance testing in their project planning, but ultimately it's just a checklist. So when they run the performance test, most of the time it's not a proper one. So it's just to fulfill the criteria, and eventually they hit the problems during the production rollout. Okay, so make sure that you get a proper performance testing. Especially you can work closely with together with my TCO team. Okay, and of course, we also help to stabilize the system within days instead of months. Okay, we have customers who suffer for almost 7 months before they actually engage us, and we actually help them to stabilize within few days. So that's the difference. When you have the right tools and the right expertise, you can actually resolve the problem much faster. So just to share, the list of customers that we have in Malaysia. Okay, so the list is not limited to this, but these are the one that I believe most of you all will get recognized. Mampu is one of our key customers in Malaysia. Lembaga Hasil, Pemodanan Nasional Berhad, so on and so forth. So you can see that we have a mixture of FSI, governments, and also insurance company, and also the education sectors. Okay, and also definitely some corporate sectors as well. So so something for the floor, right? So for agency who are interested in our solution and services, feel free to contact us, right, over this email. Okay, so for the first 5 agencies who contact us, we will provide the Guardian Digital Analytics for free for 6 months. Okay, so I will open the floor for Q&A.
Alright. Thank you. Terima kasih Cik Ko. Okay. Sementara menunggu kita punya audience memberi soalan, saya ada 2 soalan. Saya ada 1 soalan dulu. Saya mulakan dengan 1 soalan dulu. first terima kasih lah menyebut nama my TCOE tadi. Okay. Okay. Telah disentuh bahawa SLO, Service Level Objective rather than SLA ataupun Service Level Agreement ataupun Service Level guaranteed. Yang kerap kita guna sekarang ialah SLA. So kaedah untuk observability ialah menggunakan Service Level Objective. Saya ingat saya ambil contoh satu Maybank ya. Maybank telah menggunakan SLO berdasarkan keupayaan sesuatu cawangan untuk menjana pendapatan kepada Maybank. Contohnya, dia tidak lihat berapa network atau bandwidth ataupun uptime of server ataupun network and so on, atau application tu ada bugs ke apa tidak. Tapi dia melihat, let's say branch, katalah satu branch di Putrajaya diberi KPI, katalah contoh saja 200,000 sehari. Banyak sikit sangat, banyak sangat ya. 1 juta sebulan. 1 juta sebulan untuk menjana hasil ataupun sales kepada Maybank. So manager tu, branch manager dan juga keseluruhan bank diukur berdasarkan that SLO. Right? So soalan saya, berbanding kaedah itu, kaedah itu melihat secara holistik, ya. Lebih holistik makna at macro level. Sedangkan kebanyakan kami penjawat awam ni, yang terutama IT ni, akan ditanya mengenai kita punya membuat kita punya KPI ataupun kita punya, kalau kerajaan ni kita panggil SKT lah, sasaran kerja tahunan tu, something like that, berdasarkan individu punya output ataupun outcome. So what is your opinion on that? Between the macro level and this micro level as individu and as organisation, ataupun satu objektif penghasilan kerja mengikut agensi. Panjang pula soalan ni. Okay, minta pandangan.
So I think yang pertama kita tengok dekat macro level. So contohnya macam lembaga hasil, kan? So lembaga hasil macro level is cukai pendapatan yang kita perlu kumpul tahunan kena ada increase like by 10% every year. Contohnya, kan? So that macro level, macam mana you nak trickle down to the individual department, that will be the individual performance. So ultimately, individual performance will be tied back to the macro level, kan? So tapi different department will have different the KPI. So how can we define a proper KPI for that? I think that is the crucial part, especially with the new technology yang datang sekarang. So no longer we can say that the SLA macam dulu, like we talk about SLA 99.5%, kan? So we talk infra is up, then it's considered fine. Tapi sekarang macam you cakap tadi, let's say for example when we talk about the service, we don't care whether the server up or down. As a user, I just care whether I can get the service or not. I think the individual performance for the for the individuals should be measured based on the responsibility that they held. Yeah. So for example, like if we are talking about one whole digital channels, so the person must be measured based on how effective the digital channels is being adopted. Contohnya.
Baik, ada satu audience kita telah meminta untuk ni, saya akan bagi mic dekat beliau. Silakan.
Hi, selamat petang.
Petang.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Carol. Good to see you.
I joined agak lambat tadi. Maybe I missed on the testing automation part. Can you please repeat or maybe give some exposure on what kinds of testing tools that we have in terms of functional and unit testing, in terms of automation on functional testing and unit testing? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of so let me share that slide. Okay. So under the test automation, hang on, the slide macam tak gerak dah.
Jen tengah kuat kat luar.
Oh, okay. So in terms of the test automation, the part where it coordinates the, the testing and to run the test and everything, that will be the Jenkins side. In terms of the test tool that you want to use, you can have multiple choices. Kalau katakan performance testing, you can use JMeter is an open source. Okay, so license wise you tak payah bimbang. So there's no cost to the license. The other one, if let's say you katakan this is a critical system, maybe I tak percaya JMeter. So can I have a commercial tool? Yes, you can. You can have tools like NeoLoad or Load Runner, those kind of performance test tool. Those are the one that has been industry for a very long time. Okay, so those are the commercial solution. And for the functional testing, you can use Selenium, ataupun you boleh pakai Tricentis. Yeah, those also are the functional test tools where most of the majority of the people will be using. So for us, for example, we use for other customers, mostly we go for JMeter and also Selenium, right? Integrated with Jenkins. So depending on the customer's requirement. So, Encik Khairul, did I answer your question?
Encik Khairul. Oh, dia ialah tu. Okay.
Yeah.
Dia dah jawab okay. So there's another one. Muhammad Abdul. I pass you the microphone. Cik Syukur ke ni?
Ya, saya.
Ya, Cik Syukur. Okay, silakan Cik Syukur.
Terima kasih Puan. Kalau kita tengok dari segi macam Agile punya development, dia fast cycle kan, dia sprint kan. Kalau macam kami, biasanya kami akan buat documentation. Macam mana kita nak capture documentation yang masa lalui proses Agile tu? Sebab kalau macam dalam case biasa, waterfall, kita documentation tu dia dalam sepanjang masa tu kita akan buat documentation kan untuk sampai habis. Kalau dalam Agile ni macam mana untuk sprint tu, kita nak, macam mana kita nak capture? Sebab biasanya sprint masa 14 hari je kan, 2 minggu je. Macam mana nak talikan documentation punya requirement dengan software development punya requirement tu sendiri. Okay, that's all.
Okay, so usually when you go for Agile, kan, most of the time the software requirements tu akan bertukar. Dia tak fix sangat on the, for example, when you say that, I want to develop these particular applications, you will have a draft or a base, what you're going to develop, the direction, okay? Tapi the details of the modules, how many modules, things like that, usually you won't define upfront. Usually it goes along the way. So that means that you build that thing in a more lean manner, and then you slowly expand the modules. So same goes for the documentation. You will have a base documentation, but then after that, you add on the additional the additional requirements or the documentation on top of it. Yeah, but usually it's a very, very small changes along the way. So dia bukan sekaligus macam waterfall, you define all the requirements upfront and all those things. So that's why the challenge with Agile development in public sectors, because public sectors usually contract tu kena define awal. Biasanya you define 3 years or 5 years roadmap. So dia tak berapa fit into Agile development methodology. Yeah, so kalau let's say you all really want to look into how to adopt the Agile, you should start with the project planning or the contract, how the contract is being crafted. You should craft based on the Agile development methodology. Yeah, because most of the contract yang saya nampak sekarang is usually based on the waterfall methodology. Encik cukup? Okay ya?
Okay, thank you.
Alright.
Thanks.
Okay, ada soalan lain? Tadi saya ada buka satu undian ringkas bertanya, adakah agensi anda perlukan tools observability? Ada satu jawab, ya. Jadi boleh contact Cik Ko, boleh tunjuk page yang last kali tu, offer daripada beliau, yang ini. Hantarkan email anda kepada email yang telah tertera di slide berkenaan. So Guardian Digital Analytics for free untuk 6 bulan, ya. Saya ingat satu tawaran yang menarik ni. Kalau kita kirakan dari segi kos tu, banyak ribu juga ya, Cik Ko.
Yes, that one is a lot. Yeah.
Okay, alright. Ada soalan lain? Ada yang bertanya, email slide tu, share or email the slide. Okay. Core Consulting dia ada virtual booth, ya. Kalau kita pergi dekat arena, dekat virtual booth tu ada maklumat mengenai Guardian, ada maklumat mengenai perkhidmatan mereka. So boleh lawat ke sana ataupun boleh majukan lagi contact detail dekat melalui yang virtual booth sana. Alright. Ada soalan lain? Jika tak ada, saya ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Cik Ko sebab dia telah membentangkan satu tajuk yang petang-petang ni pun tajuk-tajuk macam ni nampak macam serius, tapi sebenarnya satu benda kadang-kadang selalu ditanya bila kita kata Devops Automation, apakah langkah pertama kita? Langkah nombor satu yang kita kena ambil untuk menyediakan diri kita untuk environment ini. Adakah the environment dulu, maksud environment tu kita kena ada software, hardware yang ni, ataupun orang-orang kita kena ada dulu. Orang-orang kita dah well equipped dengan latihan dan sebagainya. So saya ingat opportunity yang paling baik adalah semua agensi, saya ingat semua ada sistem. Ya, ambil peluang, ambil opportunity. Bila kita nak upgrade sistem kita tu, application kita tu, kita ambil peluang untuk menggunakan kaedah ini pula. Ya, Cik Ko, apa pandangan?
Yup. So biasanya macam sekarang, kalau teknologi punya changes and the practices kan, so macam sekarang kita tengah cakap DevOps semua tu. Tapi now they even come up with new practices macam contohnya failure as a service ataupun site reliability engineering. So we are still lagging behind, tapi people dah move forward to the next stage dah. So in that case, when we talk about whether people come first or the technology come first, I will say the technology will come. Okay, the people will have to follow immediately. Okay, so that means that you learn along the way. You jangan tunggu sampai semua benda dah matang, then baru kita nak belajar. Then it won't work out in the technology sector.
Alright.
Yeah. So the best way is to find the right partner. Find the right partner to actually go through together this journey, because biasanya they will have a different expertise that bring in from the industry side.
Okay, alright. So without ada soalan lain, tak ada. Jadi saya ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Encik Ko daripada Core Consulting dengan pembentangan beliau yang menarik dan juga tawaran yang beliau berikan kepada 5 agensi yang bertuah nanti. So jangan lepaskan peluang, kita jarang dapat offer macam ni tiba-tiba ya. So bersempena dengan Fiesta PERJASA, kita dah berjaya mengumpulkan pemain-pemain industri. Hari ini hari yang pertama kita, yang ini pembentangan yang ketiga. Jangan lupa esok dan lusa kita ada lagi. Dan yang paling penting pada hari Rabu untuk hadir dan mengundi dan semasa AGM kita. So Encik Ko, ribuan terima kasih sekali lagi dengan pasukan Encik Ko. Kita tunggu dekat booth ya. Rakan-rakan kita yang ingin bertanya lebih lanjut, silalah berkunjung ke booth beliau. Okey, sekian. Terima kasih.
Okay. Terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Terima kasih semua.
wabarakatuh. Ya.